Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Sam and today I want to take a look at how I use the color grading plugin Dehancer for DaVinci Resolve to make my 3D renders from Unreal Engine look like they were shot on film. Full disclosure, Dehancer reached out to me and provided me with a license to their software to review it for use in my 3D color grading workflow. Dehancer exists for multiple platforms like Adobe Premiere Pro, Final Cut, but I'm using it inside of DaVinci Resolve. There is this trend that I'm seeing in film where we have all grown accustomed to film shot on digital. We can see it, we can spot it, we can easily spot the use of CGI in film because it's being completely overused. It's like there is this overexposure to things that look digital. And while there is definitely a great advantage to shooting on digital, I've seen some filmmakers trying to emulate that old school analog film look. I recently watched the Alexander Payne film The Holdovers that was shot digitally, but where they did such a great job in the color grading and the sound design to make that film really feel like it comes from a different time. There is definitely an urge from creators nowadays to recreate the film look. And I find that very interesting to apply this to 3D renders. I feel like in the past few years, Unreal Engine and 3D rendering has always been about the clearest reflections, the best ray tracing, the crispiest shadows, the highest detail. And while I sure love all of those things, those are not exactly the characteristics of the film look, which does not mean I'm advocating to throw away all those wonderful features. Absolutely not. You need those to create the detail that then in color grading you can break apart or de-hance with a tool like Dehancer. Before we jump into DaVinci Resolve to show you how I use Dehancer, I want to mention that when I render in Unreal Engine, I do so using the ACES color space. Since this is a video about Dehancer, I don't want to make it longer than it already has to be. I will not cover that rendering workflow in Unreal, but I would urge you to check out the very clear and educational video tutorial by William Faucher on this subject, which I will drop in the description of the video. Let's jump into DaVinci Resolve. So here we are inside of DaVinci Resolve. Firstly, I'll have to set up a few project settings for DaVinci to work with that ACES color space workflow. So I will go to project settings. I'll firstly change my timeline resolution to what I rendered in Unreal. And I'll go to color management. Here under color science, I will check ACES CCT. And then under the ACES output transform, I will choose Rec 709 and I'll save. Next up, we'll have to import our footage into DaVinci Resolve, which I will do by going to the Edit tab, and I'll navigate to the place where I have all these EXR sequences stored to work with. So I will select all these folders and drag them into my media pool. If everything's alright, then these should import as a sequence of images. If by any chance this imports as a bunch of images and not just as one asset being a sequence, then you should go to this media window, check these three dots, and make sure that your frame display mode is set to sequence and not to individual. Then I will select my footage, right click, and go to ACES input transform, color space conversion, and ACES CG. And then I saw this change of color immediately. Now the color space is set correctly. This should now display exactly what I saw before in Unreal Engine. This is what my scene looked like. So I've got these three timelines set up with footage for us to look at. We'll start with this coast timeline where I've got this shot of this golden hour beach with some real-time fluids going on. So traditionally, how I would go about grading something like this, if I go to the color tab, I'll press Alt S to create a node, right click, node label, and I'll call it color correct. So within this node, I'll start to do some basic tweaking. So I would then probably add a little bit of contrast with the curves, and maybe I want it to be a little bit warmer, get some of that magenta back, and maybe desaturate it just a little bit. Something I also always like to add is a glow. Recently I've started to I know that I'm gonna add this glow in post, so when creating my Unreal scene I try to not overdo the bloom within the camera or the post-process volume all that much, because I know that I want to go and push it with this glow. So I'll add a glow just so I get this nice bright hot spot around this sun with the shine of the water. And then I'll probably add some film grain, choose that 35mm grain. So this would be a traditional way for me to do my color grading. But for now, we'll forget about that, and here in my library, I'll search for Dehancer. So right away, it will look a little strange because in the input source, I have to set the correct color space that I am currently working in. Alright, awesome. Now we will go over most of these settings within the Dehancer plugin, and we'll start with film and print. So let me close the rest of these. So I have film and print. So your film would be your traditional film stock. So it would be the unexposed celluloid that you would be shooting on, and then afterwards, when everything has been edited, you would want to then transfer your film onto a positive copy print so it can be shown in cinemas and theaters. So that would be the print. So for my film profile, I will choose the Kodak Supra 100. And for my film print, I will choose this Kodak 2383 print film. I can then play with the settings a little bit, and here you can play with the settings of your print. For example, the target white, whether you want the print to be a little warmer, a little colder, the exposure of your print. And then two very interesting ones, I think, is tonal contrast and color density. So this will allow me to either have more contrast or take away contrast in my shadows. And then color density, which I really like. I really like these deep reds in my clouds. Then we've got this film compression, which, will compress your film. So if we enable this, you will immediately see that these high lights of my sky, that they will become darker because they will become compressed. So down here we've got this color head, which is just like your basic color grading. So if we enable this, we can play with our yellows or our blues, magenta and greens, and our red and cyan. We can play with our highlights, our midtones, and our shadows. And then we've got these three. We've got film grain, halation, and bloom. So starting with the film grain, there's always like a profile that you can choose that's like pre-made, but if you set it to custom, you can then go in and adjust these settings. So for the film grain, you can adjust the size, the amount, the film resolution, shadows, midtones, and highlights. So this film resolution is a really interesting one, because what happens if you render in 3D, or what's expected when you render in 3D, is that you have this really high resolution, right? To show off that you can have these very sharp and crispy anti-aliasing and shadows and all that cool stuff going on in your 3D scene. But if you're trying to get that analog film look, not everything is needed to be such a big resolution, such a high resolution. Maybe you do want to compress that resolution. So if we zoom in here, we take this boat and this rock, and we lower that film resolution, you will see that it starts to like blur into that film grain, because you are decreasing the resolution of your film. And then next up we got halation, which is a very important one when you're trying to emulate this analog film look. It is essentially the tiny bleeding that you get into your edges that make it look analog. So to show this, I'll once again zoom into this boat and this rock. So if you look at this boat and this rock, they're very much silhouettes, right, against this setting sun. But if I turn on halation, you will see that that light is essentially bleeding into that silhouette and creating this red edge. You can of course also override this profile by going to custom and play with all of these settings. So I can play with this local diffusion and make that bleed even bigger, which I shouldn't exaggerate too much because then it starts to become unrealistic. Amplify the effect. You can change the hue a little bit, and then of course you can also play with the impact. Now there will always be some part of the image where you find this effect to be working the best, but you always have to keep in mind like the bigger picture. If you were to push that local diffusion, see if I push it a lot, you'll see that also on this rock and on this rock in the foreground, it gets a little iffy. So I'll dial it back a bit. But then if you check here, also in the foreground, not only on the boat and the rock, but here, this bounce both on this beach rock in the foreground and on the wet sandy shore, that you get this kind of halation bounce. And then we've got bloom, so you'll see that taking effect. Also here I can go to custom, amplify. Once again I'll zoom in to show the difference. Without, with, without. And then next we've got film damage, which is something that I'm not really going to use. I think film damage is good to use if you have a very specific idea in mind of what your scenes should be, but it isn't very subtle. I find it really lays it on pretty thick that you're trying to emulate that analog effect by creating these, I don't know if you can see them, but they're like these scratches on your film emulsion. Like, it's a nice effect, but I'm already not the most subtle creator in terms of content that I make in Unreal. So this is not something that I would use. And then you've got film breadth and gate weave. So film breadth, essentially, it will emulate the slight inconsistencies of how the light got to your celluloid film. So what it will do is it will like pan a noise of slightly different shades of color over your footage, as if frame by frame it hasn't been exposed to the same amount of light It is pretty subtle, and I do really find that it works really well. So if I boost up that color and I go through here, you will see that the shadows shifting from green to more red, cyan, purple. Like it's really shifting. So this would be like absolutely way too much. Of course, so I'm gonna take that preset. So it's just very slight change of color. And then we've got gate weave, which is if the film is kind of shaking around a little bit while it's recording. It's also a very subtle effect that does really sell that shaking nature of analog film. Then there is Vignette, of course. This is a very well known thing. Shouldn't really have to cover this. And here under output you can still adjust the total impact of your changes. So this is without Dehancer, and this is with Dehancer. So I tested Dehancer on a few other shots of mine, like for example some of the river shots from my video The Wizard, where I combined Dehancer with the traditional glow effect from DaVinci Resolve to pack that extra punch in those highlights. Especially in the wide shot of the river, I was able to get very nice looking halation that sells the analog feel very well. I also used Dehancer on my last video, Launch, and the big difference between the coast and the river shots are that they are, kind of photoreal looking. And things that you could photograph in real life, making it easier to make it look like it has been shot on film. In my video Launch, we're dealing with a science fiction environment, immediately breaking our suspension of disbelief, or at least we know these things are not real. Yet I found, because we are in such a trashed and grimy landscape, that Dehancer had added value. I think in the end, if you are a very well-seasoned color grader, you could achieve all of these things that Dehancer gives you without the use of the plugin. It would just take you more time. Yet, for me personally, because I am a 3D artist first and not a seasoned color grader, it is a very great tool, allowing me to work fast and achieve very advanced grading without a ton of work, while still giving me the options to go and tweak all the settings that I want. Would I use this for all my projects going forward? That depends on what I'm trying to achieve, I guess. But I do have to say that even without the grain and compression settings, the halation and film profile still provide me with a quick way to get a specific look that I do really like a lot. Is this a tool that every Unreal cinematic artist will profit from? That depends on their goals. My goal is always composition and lighting first, and all the rest comes after that. I focus on the art direction, and if that requires an analog film look, then Dehancer is the obvious choice now. But if your goal is to showcase your tech art or something very high fidelity or a photo scan item, then decreasing that detail with Dehancer might not really be what you're looking for. I feel like Dehancer works really hard to make your footage look even more photoreal, but at the cost of crispy quality. And if that is something that you want to preserve in your 3D renders, then this is not the tool for you. Another thing that Dehancer might have working against itself, at least within DaVinci Resolve, is the performance cost. I have a pretty beefy workstation, and real-time playback without lagging is not an option for me when using Dehancer, which, was what made me cross over from Adobe After Effects to DaVinci Resolve. Lastly, the price is probably the biggest turnoff when considering Dehancer. I think the tool is way too expensive, and if I hadn't received a copy to test it with my 3D workflow, I probably would not have bought it myself. There are options to pay for only parts of the Dehancer toolkit, But in my opinion, in the end, it's the layering of all of these different effects that makes a difference. So it really is the Dehancer Pro that I would recommend going for. But to make that price at least a little bit less costly, if you use the code SAMG10, you will get 10% off on your purchase of Dehancer. I quickly want to say that Dehancer also has an iOS app. The promo code is not applicable to that application, but it is a very nice application to keep editing your 3D renders on your phone, or maybe just some pictures of your cat. I will post that code in the description of this video. This was my breakdown of the use of Dehancer within my Unreal Engine 2 color grading workflow. Let me know in the comments what you think of this tool and if you would be interested in using it to add that film look to your 3D renders. Bye bye, and maybe I'll see you in the next video.